demo. All right, my music didn't play. Let's try this one. Yep.
If that works.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix. I'm your host, Janet Lessin, and today I have Richard Knight, and this is part 3 of our interview. And Richard's an amazing storyteller. I can just imagine being around a campfire somewhere up in Scotland or Ireland or somewhere in the mountains. I think Scotland. And there he is, telling a tale of his life. Welcome back to the show, Richard Knight. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Janet, for a wonderful introduction. There we go. Couldn't think of the word there. Had to get my mind on track. You know, it's Sunday, so you're kind of lazy. Or you try to be, but sometimes life just doesn't let it happen that way.
I don't never... a lazy Sunday in a long time. I've been doing this show since 2012, so every Sunday, like clockwork, we meet at the Sacred Matrix. So you'll have to do a recap, brief, just to catch us up. I do invite our listeners to go to aquarianradio.com, and on there I have the links for Richard's first and second interview. They are amazing, and we're probably going to do a couple more. I don't know how far we'll get. I think we're only up to, how old are you, Richard, 18 at this time? Richard's really...
No. Actually, we got kind of stalled out. We got kind of stalled out, and we got just the precept of iceberg beginning to melt at age 15. So we're going to pick up tonight from 15 to 18.
15.
Right.
Okay, so.
All right.
Yes, I have
a brief
There.
recap.
Go ahead.
Brief recap in basically a couple of elongated sentences. All right. First and foremost, I came into the planet Earth completely aware and completely attached to God, without no loss of memory, with a very sincere awareness of who I am, where I came from, and how I came to be. And this was proven to me over and over and over again in all kinds of weird, bizarre circumstances, as well as all kinds of trauma and rejection and so on and so forth. But anyway, when I come out the birth canal, I had the veil over me, the top of my head. And as a result of it, the gypsies call that born with the third sight, or the inner awareness of all that goes on that is normally unseen, which is the gift, of course, of seeing spirits, hearing spirits, talking to spirits, and being aware of any and all entities in the room, seen or unseen by other persons that may or may not be present. The doctor was totally shocked because naturally when he spanked me for a bum and told me, well, cough or spit or make some kind of sound or noise, and basically I reached out and grabbed his arm and said, do it again and I'll break it. Now, of course, infants don't normally have the power of speech, so that was kind of my to-do entrance to the world, and the doctor's looking at me saying, ooh, you better throw this one back or something. Something ain't right here. And he just exited the room shaking his head, and the nurses all collided together and kind of bumped together and everything else, and they're saying, well, okay, let's clean him up. I guess he's kind of messy looking, so we'll clean him up and put him back in his mother's arms. And, of course, my mom was sort of receptive, but she really wasn't. You know what I'm saying? In other words, the normal cosmic connection, heartfelt connection, emotional connection that you would have between a mother and child, especially a mother and son, wasn't there. And so I grew up without this, but there was a strong psychic connection.
Let me pause right there and unpack that a little bit, because that was a lot. You just said a lot. First of all, I don't.
Well, I know, but we're not digging into this. This is what we did last time, you see. We went through the first 14 years.
Okay, it's fine. No, but this is a very important point. It's a very important point. Your mother rejected you, which happens sometimes. But I just unpacked it, because you came in conscious and aware, I have several other friends that came in consciously where I came in conscious, but then they like blanked me out at 18 months so that my mother wouldn't kill me, right? So there is this problem. So who do you think you were, or who do you know you were, that your mother had rejected you? Was your past life stuff why she rejected you? Were you from a species that she and humans are fighting, or what was the backstory to that your mother rejected you? She
basically looked down and saw she basically looked down upon me visage and looked at the visage of me face, and she says, oh my God, he's a spinning image of the one that I had an affair with. And of course, this was held out of wedlock, and her parents were Roman Catholics. This was the ultimate sin you could ever do in their eyes, to have a child out of wedlock. That just was this was a grand no. So this was a child of sin. This was a bastard child that should never be baptized, etc., etc., etc.
I understand that level. However, with what you just said, that you came in conscious, you spoke to the doctor, what part of that did she realize looking at you as well? Not just resemblance to the father.
Well, okay, the father was never present. You have to understand that I grew up without a father, or the real father anyway, in my life. And even the father of record that's on my birth certificate, I actually never physically met even him all through life. But I did have some very serious conversations with him. And there was a DNA test that was done, I want to say approximately sometime in the 80s. And of course, it was proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that no, DNA speaking, he was not my dad. So, later in life, much later in life, I would learn. So do you
think you might have been fathered by somebody that wasn't quite human? I mean, a lot of people, they're fathered by extraterrestrials, you know what I mean?
Well, I've always clung to the belief that I was fathered by Mother and Father God. Now, that's not to say that I'm a divine being or that I'm more consciously aware than Christ was, say, at the age of 33, but there was this divine connection between me that I always felt this intense love, and it was that intense love that I constantly relied upon to get me through life. So, like I said, that was my conscious awareness at the time, that, I had been sent here basically to help mankind, even though I was given the understanding that mankind would utterly and totally reject me thousands and thousands of times over with. And that in turn, I was not to be affected by this, that in turn, any time I had any doubt or any frustration or any worry or concern, I was just to turn inward and basically embrace my higher heart, which is basically the part of us etherically where the love of God and Goddess, or Mother and Father God, radiate through us constantly. Or you could say stepping into the flow of creation, which that is what divine love is. It's the flow of creation.
So I know we have the story of the Messiah of Jesus and his divine intervention, but what I've been unpacking and uncovering through the years is that's not the only story. We have Osiris and all these other people, both in ancient times and modern times. So I'm suggesting this, and I'm probably interjecting it, and you can say yay or nay, is that there was some kind of extraterrestrial or divine intervention in the creation of your DNA and the physical form for you to have these abilities, which we covered in interview 1 and 2, your abilities, and we're going to flesh them out even more in the subsequent shows. I'm just interjecting that for everybody to entertain, like in the what was it, the Twilight Zone. Let you entertain these thoughts, right?
You could well be right, and the only reason I give any substance to that at all is simply because I was abducted at the age of 5. And the abduction was one of, it wasn't a shock, okay, when the bright white light came down as I was swinging on a swing in about the early evening hours. In other words, it had just turned dusk, all right? And I was swinging with all my might on this swing, old-timey swings, that had the big, long chains on them and so forth. And my determination was that I was going to touch the tips of my toes to the leaves of the tree. And ironically, just as this occurred, this is when this big beam of white light appeared, and all of a sudden I was no longer on the ground. All of a sudden I'm floating up inside this beam of white light. And when I get to the ship, not that I could really describe to you what the ship was because it was so huge that all I could see was the underbelly of it. Okay? And when I was brought on board, they were grays, okay, in the typical sense that are recognized as beings or extraterrestrials that are gray in nature these days. There were also blues, and there were also greens, and there were also purples. Now, the purples and the greens were the more distant of the two, and the grays seemed to be holding this, like, I don't know what you call it, kind of like a kindergarten class, you could almost say, because there were about at least a good 20 or 30 other children in the room or the bay or whatever the hell it was, being treated at that given moment. And it seemed that the grays were telecommunicating, intuitively amongst each others and also with the blues, while the purples and the greens kind of stood off in the far distance. I mean, you were aware of their energy and you're aware that they were there, but they didn't really seem to have any kind of participation. Or if it was only of the mental kind and not otherwise. Try as I may, I attempted to make telepathic communication with the grays, and they kept telling me in a very soothing voice, be calm, lay still. What you're about to undergo is something that you've already previously agreed to, and this is the fulfillment thereof. You had previously made a contract with us, and we are going to put in 2 different tracking devices, one in your physical self and one in your etheric body. And the reason and purpose behind this is so that we can measure firsthand through your persona and through your physical being all of the reactions that the other humans around you will in turn how they react to you since you're born with 14 senses. And I said, okay.
And that was the point.
This sounds interesting.
Senses.
Right. And that's at the time I was kind of put in some kind of stasis or something because I had no feeling and no sensation whatsoever. And basically what transpired in the next few minutes or the next hour or however long it was, I have totally no awareness of it. In other words, other than the fact that I knew that they had put something into my nose, that was the only detail that I knew whatsoever. And even that was somewhat blurry. And then, of course, the next thing I knew, boom, boom, bam, I was being teleported back down to the surface of the earth. And instead of going back to the swing set, I was now in the room, the dining hall, where all the kids were fed at the Catholic boarding school where I was boarded at the time.
Oh. Wow, that's cool. Okay, so let's fast forward, because we covered all of this in interview 1 and 2. And we were somewhere after you did the exorcism on your partner, the cat was dead. Then
okay, wait a minute. Now you're flying into the future again, okay? Because that's all going to be gone over. We're going over from age 15 to the 18, and we're going to give the whole storyline that happened in those 3 years. And part of what you just elicited were some minor points in that track line, okay? So in other words, there were a lot of events that didn't get unpacked.
Okay, so what the part that you did cover was your lover live-in of 2 or 3 years, and then his battle, and then at the very end, I think we left off with he went out into the garage or something, and a cat had sacrificed itself. So
to a demonic entity it basically gave itself, and so by the cat actually dying, the entity was returned to wherever the hell it had come from. In other words, the cat's spirit was enough in control that when the entity actually took control of the cat had the wherewithal spiritually, even though it was greatly frightened, and I can't even imagine what the cat might have gone through themselves.
Oh, okay.
It was a very beloved cat of mine, and it was only approximately 2.5 years old, and it was a solid black cat that had a white star on its chest. Okay, and when I found it that morning, all of its claws were extremely extended, and there was this horrific look of fear on its face.
Yeah, I recovered a cat that's been hit by a car, and they do the same thing. It's like,
oh goodness,
they're kind of frozen with their
like
fur out.
Like instant rigor mortis or something. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We do it ourselves, but we do it in a far more lengthy period of time, over a number of hours. Where with them, it seems to be instantaneous almost.
I had a kitty who survived, and its tail was stuck, with all the hair out. It gradually went down, but it was very interesting. It was stuck the hair out for quite a while, and then it came back. Anyway, enough of that. So the poor kitty. So Ned, there's where the story comes. What happened next in your life? You left this.
Okay, so you want to jump forward? What's we doing?
Yeah, let's go from there because that's where we left off.
I don't even remember. I had taken several notes. I had taken several notes, of course, and to my mind's eye, we had skipped over 15, 16, and hit only the couple of high points of 17, and basically a couple of high points in 18. Now, if you'd rather just leave all that unpacked, that's fine with me, and we can move forward from there. Although we're going to move into an area. There's still a lot of things that went on, mind you, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot more downtime in comparison to specifically age 17, for example, where there was just so many comings and goings and so many ordeals and everything else going on that it wasn't funny.
So we started to go into Stanford Research Institute, how you barely escaped the government at age 18.
Yeah.
I think that's where we left off. If you want to go and go from there, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I had been attending Temple in the Stars, which is basically a meeting that was held at San Jose Community College every Saturday, and there were a great many of us, probably about 30 to 50 people, okay, and each Saturday evening around 8 o'clock or so, California time, of course, because that's where I'm from. Anyway, they would have presenters come, and these presenters talked about everything that was occult, everything that was magical, everything that was supernatural, everything that was spiritual, covered the whole wide arena and basis of this. And we would meet, and we would, have this presentation, and it was in a huge music room. So as you might imagine, it was kind of like a very tiny amphitheater where you had like a podium for the director of the musicians to stand and put on their speech or whatever. And, of course, we had, slide reel presentations, and we had movies that we were shown and different things of that nature. And after this, of course, as the speaker would basically go into the center of our circle, because there were 3 rows of seats or 3 tiers of seats throughout every wall in this room, with the exception, of course, of the podium of the director themselves, okay? And, of course, the very far end of seats that was behind the director, they were left vacant because, naturally, that's where the overhead projector went in the screen presentations and movie presentations and all that kind of thing went on directly from his side, directly to a large screen behind him, okay? If and when that was used, which sometimes it was used and sometimes not. Probably our biggest highlight in that particular aspect is I've shown healers that exist on an island, and I'm not sure exactly where the island is, but it was a great controversy that came out all over the world news, around the world, basically speaking, when these divine healers, which is how I classify them, and the reason for this is what I'm about to describe, okay? This movie was very intense, and it was very graphic. In other words, basically speaking, a person would be walked into this surgical arena, basically speaking, and they would be laying out on sterile beds and so on and so forth, and they would not be given any kind of anesthesia or anything else. Rather, they would be laid flat and then in turn halfway undressed, or specifically undressed where the disease or the malady or whatever the complaint was that the person had was at. And basically, so the skin was uncovered in that particular area. Then these physicians would basically stand one on each side of this person, and they would basically turn their palms upwards, and it was almost as though they were bringing forth external energy, all right, which I'm going to have I would personally say that this is the energy of God coming into them so that they can in turn manifest and do whatever surgeries they needed to do, okay? So in this one particular instance, there was a great tumor that was evidently eating this person up inside because it was in their stomach, all right? And the one physician talked to the other physician, and you weren't allowed to hear what they were saying because naturally they had on surgical masks and all this other kind of thing. And they seemed to communicate both without speaking and also by hand gestures, okay? And so the
Mm-hmm.
one on the right looked down at the lady. It was a lady that was for them or whatever, stretched out. And, of course, like I said, she was wearing a two-piece outfit or whatever, and the upper portion of her outfit, her blouse or whatever, was all raised away so that the bare skin of her stomach was there and only exposed thereof, okay? And this doctor sat there,
Mm-hmm.
and I call him a doctor because that's how they appeared. They appeared in surgical gowns and masks and the whole 9 yards, just like a surgery center, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, he waved his hand across this woman's stomach. And as he waved his hand very slowly across it, an opening came open in the middle of this woman's stomach. There was no surgical knives, no any kind of tools or anything else being used, other than evidently the energy from the palm of this man's hand basically went across this woman's stomach and opened an opening in the skin. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other doctor then in turn said, passed his hand around kind of in a circular motion, getting smaller and smaller till the circle was closed. And basically what he was doing was locating where the tumor was, or at least that's the impression that you had, okay? And this was, subtitled. In other words, there was no audio to it at all. It was subtitled. So basically there were a few comments here and there written in white underneath the scene as it was transpiring. That's how you get the impression that, this is where what was going on, okay? And so the second doctor reaches into her stomach, okay? And he pulls out what appears to be some kind of malignant growth, all right? And he puts it into a big pan, specimen pan or whatever the devil, and then a nurse comes and takes it from him, and of course, he in turn is taking a couple steps back, and the other doctor in turn waves the same hand exactly in the reverse motion, and as he does so, there is no scar, no wound apparent or anything else. And
wow.
I was just absolutely amazed, saying, my God, is this actually transpiring? Is this just hoax, some kind of hokey film that was put together with trick photography or exactly what? And the one that was doing the presenting actually passed around newspaper articles where these doctors were being displayed and talked about on the front of very different newspapers throughout the world.
Were these doctors, what country were these doctors from? Were they American or?
No, I think they were either Chinese or Taiwanese or one of the Oriental races. Could even be Philippines for all I know. Oh,
right.
Okay. The Orkney Islands, okay, which I'm not sure exactly where they are, other than somewhere out in the Mediterranean, or somewhere out there in the Atlantic anyway. And that's where they had gathered to set up this healing center, and this healing, and the woman that had the tumor or whatever, cyst or whatever the devil it was in her stomach was no longer removed, and all of a sudden another person was brought right in. Okay, and depending on what the situation was, they were healed or attended to in whatever manner needed to be done. And this was only taken maybe the whole of 5 minutes, if that. And they were treating long lines of people. Okay, it wasn't like you know how it goes. Normally, under regular operating procedures here in the States, it usually takes they usually call you in for surgery, and you're to arrive there about 5 o'clock. You don't actually go into the surgery itself until after you've had some sedation done, and then they actually give you the anesthetist does his number on you when you're actually in the surgical room itself. It takes anywhere from 2 to 3 hours for them to do what they got to do, simply because once you're under anesthesia, it takes a good while for them to get done whatever it is they're doing to you, and then in turn, as you slowly come out from under anesthesia, they take you to the recovery room, and you spend an hour or so in the recovery room until you basically get your faculties back and then have an understanding of what's going on. Okay? And then in turn, of course, you're put back in your regular hospital room, and eventually, a few hours later, or maybe it depends on how serious the surgery was, of course, as to how long you're there and when in fact you're released. This can last for days on end, all right? This whole procedure was lasting 5 minutes, and the person was getting up and walking away as though nothing had happened. So
That's amazing.
was the other shocking part. That was the other shocking part of it. I'm going, is this for real? Is this actually happening? And I mean, I've been going to the Temple in the Stars since approximately age 15, all right? And so by now, I was about 17 and a half years old when I was seeing all this. And so that's, I share that background with you because, it's much more entertaining and it's much more enlivening, and you get a whole lot better perspective on things when you actually told the truth of an individual's experience and tradition by a practitioner thereof right before your eyes. And so I just used the medical one because, that was way beyond, regular understanding, because, that's like, okay, God is working through the hands of these given individuals, and he's doing it so fast that, it's obviously a miracle that's transpiring right in front of your eyes. And, of course, like I said, they had become very world-renowned in a very short period of time, and the press, of course, had been taking pictures of them and everything, which, of course, I guess there was some kind of live camera, because I can't say exactly what period of time this was occurring, perhaps in the 70s, the 80s, somewhere in there anyway. And of course, this was a medical anomaly because this was not supposed to be able to happen. But yet here it was, these people were doing this, and there was it was checked out both by journalists and both by news reporters, and also by scientists and also by medical authorities. And of course they were all basically shocked because they had no understanding whatsoever as to how this would transpire, and yet they couldn't refute what was going on in front of their eyes. So
I wonder if it's still going on, if they are still doing those types
I'm
of
sure that
healings.
it probably is. I'm sure that it probably is. I don't doubt it in the least. Okay? And so if you're talking about one person being healed within 5 minutes, hell, within a day's time, you could heal 1,000. So anyway.
Yeah, we'd eliminate disease
right.
if we could get that out.
Exactly.
So
exactly, or at least disease on a one-on-one basis, And again, then you have to question as to, well, is this divine will? And if so, are these people being chosen specifically, just as at times people are being chosen specifically to be abducted at a certain point in time of their lives, and then in turn return to, return to their routine, though they really no longer can because they've been changed from that moment forward from the experience that they've had. People get pulled up into ships when they're driving along the road, and they have hours disappear that they can't account for, and all this kind of thing. So anyway, getting back to the timeline, let's see, we're focusing now on age 18, correct? All right. At age 18.
Yeah, we're getting any scraps of. Okay, yes, it says 18. I thought there might be some scraps of 17, but yes.
Well, yeah. I could go 17. 17 was you see, I'd already been studied and everything under the auspices of a native mentor, and it was this native mentor that I had met at the Temple in the Stars, and this is how the story connects, okay? And he had been the one that actually took me out to Stanford and introduced me around to people, and then, of course, they would do all kinds of different things. They would test me under scientific conditions. Okay, well, go ahead and move that object over there, which I was doing through telekinesis, and I would move the object from one end of the table to the other. And it was obviously that it was a perfectly flat table. There was no wind. There was no other physical explanation that this object could move. And they then, in turn, tested it in weight and dimension-wise, okay? So we started out with like a lead top or something like that, and then we moved on up to weights that were 25 and 50 pounds, and then we actually went on up to actually a physical person sitting in a chair, and the person being lifted from one chair to the other end of the room and sat back down in another chair. Okay, that's how far and extreme the tests were. Okay, because these scientists or parapsychologists or whatever you want to call them were basically doing it on behalf of the university, but they were also an outlet of exam for various agencies of the government that were never disclosed. Okay? And so this
you
went
were
on.
lifting people and with your mind and carrying them across the room?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
Why
not
are
just pencils.
Why are you walking
not
the earth
just
right
pencils.
now? I mean,
because I am a sovereign being. You see, and when we're talking in a sovereign being can disappear, Sovereign beings can teleport themselves from one place to another. Sovereign beings can do all kinds of what would be considered supernatural gifts or supernatural abilities that most humans do not even have, nonetheless even dream of. But I have to give emphasis here because, you see, everyone listening, including yourself, Janet, of course, you all have these abilities. You see, these are part of your divine right as a divine child, God and Goddess, or however, whatever your deity is that you pray to or whatever. That's neither here nor there. The fact still remains that a greater power than yourself created your spirit, and your spirit has come into what you would call a puppet being. In other words, this physical self is not you. This physical self is merely the tool that you use while you are here experiencing life. And then, of course, once you finish whatever mission it is you came here to complete, then you go home. So I interject that because, it should be a very, very stern positive note, you see. The only thing that ever holds back anyone from doing anything is their ability and belief in themselves, because we get in our own way all the time, because we're allowed outside influences to come in and influence us and tell us that, no, you can't do that, or what we believe or perceive to be the accepted norm becomes the accepted norm from our perspective in our reality. Whereas, you see, of course, as a child,
children have these abilities, but they get squelched because, their parents react in a negative way.
Oh, yeah.
You have the nuns
Exactly.
reacting in a negative way. And so
the parents, their peers, teachers, everybody that they are affiliated with or come in contact with are all frowning on them and saying, slapping like the back of their hand and saying, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. You're not supposed to do that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to stop doing that. You need to stop doing that. And if you hear no over 1,000 times,
and locked in a room, and you got put in a library when you weren't allowed to interact with other children. So that had to be horrendous. That's when you're developing socially, and you're getting traumatized.
Well, that's true, but you have to understand that from a spiritual perspective, I understood that it was only the persona of the body that they were attempting to traumatize, when in actuality, as a spiritual being, I was in no way affected.
I understand. Yeah.
And that's why I refer to the term of sovereign being. In other words, you're sovereign in that you're aware of who you are, where you came from, how you're connected to source, and that in turn, a breach cannot be committed against you, nor can it be interfered with in any way by any power that man would in turn attempt to wield against you.
So what I'm saying is, you're being tested at Stanford Research, and I mean, you had these abilities. It's amazing that whoever's really monitoring it, the government lets you go.
The scientists, you see, were making all documented evidence and taking photographs and everything else of this kind. And the most significant test and the most damaging test that they gave me was they set me in a very nice recliner and so forth, and they said, okay, we want you to go into the deepest state of meditation that you can possibly reach. Now, of course, they have electrodes all over my head, they have electrodes all over my chest for my heart, and all kinds of different things to measure what is going on with me brainwave-wise and everything else. And basically, what happened was, as this testing was being done through the EKG machine, I went into such a depth of meditation that it sent electronic feedback up the wiring into the EKG machine and burnt the machine out. And it was at this point that my mentor, the Native American friend who had brought me out there to begin with, took me by the hand and he said, no, we have to go. And I said, well, okay. And he says, these people are not friendly, okay? These people are testing you for hidden agendas. There's an ulterior motive at work here that you're unaware of that I know because I'm one of the staff members here, okay? And because I'm a staff member, I'm clued in on a whole lot of meetings and a whole lot of more information than you ever become aware of, okay? Because you're just a test subject. So we call you in and we run you through tests just like you would a rat in a maze, okay? And just to see how you react and so forth and what your abilities are. And Now I want you to remove yourself from the program totally, and I want you to disappear. Because
well, he protected
the individual,
you. That's what I was.
Yes.
I was
Yeah,
wondering.
he shielded me. He shielded me from the government that came through once or twice a month to pick up and the most selected, gifted individuals and made them disappear. And ironically, most of the children, or teenagers or young adults that were present in the program were in similar situations as myself. In other words, there was no strong family connection. They had they didn't have very many close friends. So it was almost like the gifted ones that they were choosing were also selected by society to be rejected and of no major concern.
Yes. Wow.
So that way there would be no interference by family or friends or whatever,
Right.
Well, of course, you have to understand now, with everything that I've been through up until that time, I was very rebellious, very self-conscious, somewhat shy, somewhat to a degree introverted, okay? And yet at the same time, I had all of these abilities, and I had basically begun to tone them down. Because when my good friend who was Native American told me that I needed to disappear, I said, well, then I need to tone things down and put them away to such a degree that I can go unnoticed and appear to be perfectly normal. So in other words...
And that happens to a lot of people. Our listeners might be going, well, there's not people that have all these abilities. They go, no, this is what happens to them because it's too dangerous for them to be special or magical or have abilities.
I mean, it brings to mind the movie Firestarter, okay? Where basically this was a girl who had the telekinetic ability to raise flames and the temperature in a room and actually project fire from her very essence and even have the flames go around her entire physical self without hurting her in any way. But yes, she could set flames to a room, she could set flames to a person, and this was just all through telekinetic thought, okay? And the government has sequestered her and taken her off to a compound. And in the compound, they tried to control her. And this doctor tried to get close to her, and no matter how he tried, he couldn't get into her inner circle, you could say, okay? And so eventually what happened, it turned out that her mother and father were both gifted, okay? And they were both very strong intuitives and very strong mentalists. And the father had the ability to shift or alter change in a given circumstance with all the players involved in that change. However, outwardly, his nose would bleed, okay? So the father was attempting to get the girl away from the compound, and they were, of course, creating all kinds of interference. They were shooting at him and all of this kind of thing. And if I remember the story well, I believe eventually they did, in fact, succeed at killing both her mom and her dad. And as a result, she became similar to Carrie. Her telekinetic abilities just went off the chain, and she ended up burning the whole compound. In other words, she locked everybody in the buildings and ignited the buildings, and the whole compound burned to the ground. And that's kind of the cliffhanger they leave you at the end of the movie, okay? So again,
back to your movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
So anyway, I put that in there. I love to tell stories, but I love to teach or share by example, because examples, make a more emotional connection to you, so that you, the listener, can actually see or feel what's going on in the story, and that's what a good storyteller does. And I mean, yes, I'm telling a story, but at the same time, I'm also sharing factual events and experiences that actually occurred in my own life. Okay. Right. So at the age of 18, I'd already undertaken a 2-year internship with a detective agency in California, which I will not name, even though he is one of the most world-renowned detectives in society, at least back in that day, which would have been in the late 70s. Okay. And after this 2-year internship, I had been promised that as his protege, I would basically go out on my own, and he would give me all the supplemental credentials and wherewithal that I needed in order to go into business for myself as a sole practitioner. All right. So I've got all this going on in the background, all right? I've got all the background going on with just having gotten out of a 3-year relationship that ended in an exorcism, no less, that also almost cost me my life, all right? And so I'm running away from all of this, and I say, well, okay, let me go join the Army National Guard. So I decide to go out, and I'm becoming an Army National Guard member, all right? And it's a military police company. Now, the military police of the Army National Guard do not send their troops off to a boot camp. Their boot camp is actually held on place in the barracks and in the compound that they have assessed and conjoined for themselves, because they have everything, all the training methods are right there on hand. So, if you want to be taught hand-to-hand combat, they teach you hand-to-hand combat 101. Then they teach you group settings. If you want to chase down a car, they have a skid pad, so they teach you how defensive driving and attack strategies and all this kind of thing. And if they expose you to 4 or 5 different kinds of gas, and of course you're masked, and then you're asked to pull off the mask, and then you're asked to put on the mask again. So you're actually physically exposed to these various chemical agents, so that in turn, should you ever in the future come in contact with them, you would know how to respond immediately. Okay, and then of course you're also taught weapons and tactics, arrest procedures, and all the good stuff that goes into being a military policeman. But I emphasize that this is done all on site rather than at a boot camp circumstance. Okay, and the reason I give this emphasis is you have to again understand that I have been trained in the martial arts for 9 years. And I am competent, and I already have 1 black belt, and I am very, very close to getting my second. Okay, and this is backed up further by in turn becoming involved in karate and kung fu competitions statewide. They transited from city level to county level to state level. Okay, and this is all being done from age 16 forward. All right, so at 18, I've been very well rounded, and at that time, I had been told, okay, I never saw any certifications or anything of that nature, but I was told that I was the 3rd highest black belt in the state of California. Now, that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. But you have to also understand, okay, I am a spiritual being. So therefore, if my spiritual essence comes forward and takes control of my physical self, you're not dealing with a regular human being. Okay, you're dealing with something that is being controlled spiritually by an essence that cannot be controlled within this 3rd-dimensional reality. All right? So naturally, my opponents didn't stand a chance when they got in the ring with me because, I could read their minds, even though I kept this to myself, of course. And, I could understand what they were about to do towards me before they had a chance to do it. And therefore, I could countermeasure their moves before they had a chance to throw them in. So this gave me a veritable, very strong edge in regards to those kind of competitions. And of course, as an investigator, you also have to understand that I was intuitive, very, very strongly intuitive. So if I went out and wanted to do surveillance on somebody, I could read their minds and know where they were going next and arrive where they were going next, so that I was already in place by the time they arrived. So, that gave me also a severe edge as an investigator, because naturally, if I know where you're going next, I don't have to follow you. I can arrive there before you arrive, and therefore appear to be part of the scenery, even though I may be using what you would call secret agent-type gadgets to put you on surveillance and to record your conversations and record your actions and so on and so forth, all on the behalf of a 3rd client or the actual master client that had asked me to look into this particular person's actions. Now, of course, one case, because I didn't work just for individuals, I also worked for corporations and so forth. And there was one case that was a workman's comp case, and I was basically told that in no uncertain terms that they thought this person was totally faking things, because they claimed to have lost the full momentum and movement of their arms, both arms, needless to say, to the degree that they could not utilize their hands and arms to lift more than maybe 5 pounds. Okay, so they were they were very, very debilitated. All right, and of course they formally, when you make these claims to an insurance corporation, that in turn the insurance corporation takes it to the court of law, okay, which is a workman's comp court, to make the decision as to whether or not you will be granted that workman's comp disability or workman's comp compensation, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, in this particular instance, it was, again, another lady that happened to be the focus of my attention, all right? And, of course, she had this debilitating, she could drive a car, but she could not really shop a whole lot for herself. And usually when she went shopping, she always had someone with her so that, you know, the heavier items can be picked up and put in the buggy, and the heavier items can be bagged. The heavier items, in turn, could be put in her car. And then when she went home, of course, she also received physical assistance in unloading the groceries and putting the groceries away. Okay? This was all caught on tape, all right? And, of course, again, I knew where she was going, when she would be there, and the whole 9 yards. And, of course, it was all documented, and it was all videotaped and everything of that nature. Well, there was one evening when she decided that she wanted to go out with a good friend of hers, a fellow lady friend, okay? And she was married, and, I mean, you know, she had been working for the company that she had been working for a good 10 or 15 years. And so it was very unusual, and they thought that at first it was very legitimate. But when they started investigating things a little bit, they started hearing rumors about this woman doing other things at other times. And there was a very strong suspicion that, in fact, she was bowling with both arms. Now, of course, most bowling balls are a good 10 pounds or heavier, all right?
Yes.
So anyway, on this particular evening, I'm waiting at the bowling alley with my camera set up in all kinds of different angles and so on and so forth and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm sitting there casually having me a beer. And, of course, I'm playing into the scene because I'm allegedly paying great heed or attention to one specific rivalry between a couple of bowling teams, okay? So I blend completely into the scenery, and they don't even take notice of who I am or where I am or anything else. And they come in, and they both go up to the shop, you know, to the desk and so forth, and they say, okay, well, we want to do bowling for 3 hours, and we want to, you know, include so many matches or so many frames and so on and so forth, and all this kind of good stuff. And, of course, they rented shoes, all right? So they turned in, they got shoes from the desk. And then, in turn, of course, they went around the side. And, of course, the balls are displayed on level shelves as high as 3 tiers up, which means the third tier would be about chest high to the given individual on average, okay? And these balls are not light. These balls weigh anywhere from 10 pounds and heavier, okay? Well, these two ladies, again, were filmed basically taking chest-height balls off of the shelf and swinging them openly to adjust to see if the weight was proper for their arm. And they did this several times for several different balls, okay? And then, in turn, they were the lady under suspicion was, in fact, filmed bowling by not just one arm, but actually with both. Using 2 different lanes from 2 different angles, okay? And, of course, needless to say, when this matter came before the court, the judge was shown the videotape, and he said, okay, all right, well, we're going to play this on the down low so we can get her to admit or lie openly in court. And she did, in fact, lie openly in court, denying everything and saying that it was all a bunch of hogwash and rumors and so on and so forth. And then the judge turned the key on her and basically had the video shown in the courtroom on a live screen, and it was quite large, okay, because it was being projected by a video camera. And there she was in the bowling alley, and she's picking up these balls, and she's swinging the balls in midair. And yet she had what you would call wrist braces, elbow braces, and shoulder braces on each arm. But here tonight she's bowling, and she isn't wearing none of these braces, mind you, okay? Her arms just swinging wildly free, and she's just bowling the ball down the row, down the bowling lane, and hitting pins and all this kind of good stuff, and picking them up when the ball returns and all this kind of good stuff, and picking it up and wiping it off with a rag and all this kind of good stuff. And all of this is on camera. And the judge is saying, and you're disabled how? So anyway,
so what happened when they were busted? What did she
got a $15,000 fine and 90 days in jail.
Wow, you don't want to do fraud like that.
Yeah, committing fraud before a courtroom, you know. So anyway.
Wow.
So yes, in addition to that, there's a lot of investigations that I've gone on. There's a lot of investigations and other things, consultations and actions that I've taken on and for the behalf of the government that I'm not at liberty to discuss. There's a lot of things that have happened. I mean, I've saved the life of a CIA agent who was in the field one night at 3:00 in the morning, and this is a really hairy, scary story. Okay, I'd gone to a party at 3:00. Well, I'd gone to the party about 12:30, 1:00 in the evening or early morning hours. That was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. All right. Now, Santa Cruz Mountains is basically, roughly speaking, about maybe 100 miles, if even that far, away from the San Jose area, and basically abuts, or Santa Clara County abuts the Santa Cruz Mountains, from the aspect being the only thing that divides them is a main highway. So anyway, it's roughly, who knows, 50, 60 miles outside of San Jose, and probably 100 miles away from Santa Clara, the county seat and all that. But anyway, I went to this party, okay, and I knew already that something was not quite right, all right? And my intuition was telling me and warning me and all this kind of stuff that things were not quite the way they seemed. And I said, okay, well, so basically, even though it appeared I was imbibing a lot of alcohol, in actuality, I was drinking Cokes that were plain. But I was giving everyone the illusion that I was getting just as high or drunk or whatever as they were. So that way I was a part of the crowd. I blended in with my peers, or I blended in with my friends, and so on and so forth. So I come away from this party at about 2:30, 3:00 in the morning, and I'm completely sober, okay? And there's a very good reason for this, because basically, physically, I'm loaded for bear. Now, that's an insider's term that means you have at least 3 firearms on your physical person. And in this instance, I happen to have 5, okay? And that's what they say, loaded for bear, because it means that regardless of who or what would confront you, you would basically be competent of holding down the fort, because you'd be a one-man army, basically speaking.
Right.
And, of course, I had other firearms in the trunk, which were long-distance firearms, such as, submachine guns and, long-barrel rifles and things of this nature that are used by snipers, etc. So anyway, I'm going around, I'm leaving this party, and I go out and I get in my car, and I'm driving a Pontiac GTO, okay, which has about 450 cc engine, and of course it's it's got an air drift, air exhaust, the air inhalation system that basically makes the engine even more powerful, and in addition to that, there's also a device within the engine that allows it to be injected with substances that allow the engine to even go at higher reps per minute and also higher torque. Okay, and I won't give all the details of that. All you car experts out there know basically what I'm talking about.
My first husband had a 1966 GTO. We used to cruise it in. Yeah, I'm fully aware of that car.
Was a 69. This was a 69 GTO. Okay, and so anyway. I'm coming around, and of course the GTO is designed aerodynamically that you can pretty much go around the curve and stay within the lines almost to the degree of speeding and still be competently in control of the car. Well, I'm coming around, going around all kind of curves, because like I said, this is a mountain range, okay? And so there's all kinds of twists and turns, and some of them hairpin and some are not. And anyway, I'm coming along, and I've got my bright lights on because it's 3:00 in the morning. There ain't no traffic, okay, coming either way. And so all of a sudden I come around the bend in the road, and I slow myself down from doing approximately 60 to doing about 25, because I'm seeing what appears to be a human being standing in the middle of the road waving their arms at me. And I'm going, what the hell? Yeah, at 3 a.m. in the damn morning, I'm saying, what the hell kind of kook is going to stand in the middle of a highway, notorious for speed racers, they're notorious for drag racing even on certain portions, and all it is, at 3:00 in the darn morning, he's got to be lost his mind. So anyway, I come up, I slow down, and of course now you have to understand, without giving complete and utter details, I had federal licenses, I had state licenses, I had county licenses, all including concealed weapons, all including concealed weapons special training, tactics, and all this kind of stuff, special weapons and tactics, and a number of other courses that I had undertaken by this time, all right? And remember, I'm also in the process of becoming a military policeman, as well as having all these other licenses.
Wow.
So I slow down, and I say, well, at the very least, I'll give this man a ride into town and get what may very well be a drunken, disorderly person off the street, so that someone behind me don't come around the corner and also just mow him down and then have, a hit and run or some other kind of trauma going on.
That's very nice of you.
So I slow down,
and
of course, the car has electric windows, so I roll down the window, and I say, "Sir, you appear to be waving me down. How is it I can be of assistance?" And he says, "Well, you're not really going to believe me." And I said, "Oh, that's really a great way to start a conversation, right?" And he says, "Well, you see, like I said, you're not going to believe me because actually I'm a field agent with the CIA." And I said, "Are you really now? Do you have any credentials proving the same?" And he says, "Oh, no, we can't have credentials on our person because if they're found on our person, we'll be killed." And I said, "Okay, this guy is either high on something or who knows. Ain't no telling. Maybe he was taken up to a mothership and just dropped in the middle of the street or something. Who knows? You never know what the hell's going on at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because you see, 3 o'clock is notorious for being the highest hour of magic and also the hour of the day in which the veil between the worlds, or the veil between us that separates us from the other world, or the spirit side, where all people pass when they leave their bodies. That's where they immediately go to, is the other side. So anyway, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, I'm not scared because, hell, I've got enough firepower on me between me and what I've got in the trunk to hold off an entire army for at least a couple hours. So how does one man possibly, pose a threat to me? So I said, okay, well, I don't know whether to believe you or not. I don't know whether to take you seriously. And I said, what's your name? And then, of course, he's gotten in the car by now, okay, and I've rolled up the window, and I've asked him, to hand me his ID and then, buckle in and all that good stuff. And I'm starting to roll forward because I don't want physically my car to be in the middle of this road where it's only a couple 100 feet back. Someone else may be coming around this turn and plow into the enemy, So anyway, we're going forward, and he explains that basically the mob had tried to kill him and that basically they had run him off the road and that they presumed that he was dead or at least severely injured, and the cleanup crew that was coming behind them wasn't going to be able to get there for half an hour. And so, basically all of this occurred. And so, of course, I'm saying to myself, okay, right, now you're trying to tell me that they ran off the road. Well, where's your car? And he no sooner gets the words out of his lips, and there's the car. And the very front end of the car is smashed directly up against the solid rock mountain, okay? And ironically, all right, just as all this is happening in front of me, I happen to look in the rearview mirror, and all of a sudden a pair of headlights appear out of nowhere.
Oh, no.
So
no.
I slam the car into full gear, and I hightail it as fast as I can possibly go, upwards of speeds of over 100 miles an hour. And the closest town is a little town that's only like about, maybe 30 or 40 miles out of the mountains, okay? And it's so small a town that they don't have a 24/7 sheriff's department. Instead, in order to contact the sheriff's department, you have to use a red phone in a little red box, okay? Now, I don't know whether to take this man's story for real or for not. So anyway, everything's going on. Excuse me for a second. I got to get something to drink. I'm getting
you're talking.
Wispy here.
Go for it. Wow. So this is
anyway,
exciting. This is like out of a spy movie.
So we pull into the town of Los Gatos, which basically in Spanish means the Lost Gate. Okay.
Right.
And so anyway, I pull up, and of course I'm in the center of the city and county complex, and of course the PD is like about 2 miles away. And I said, well, since I picked him up in the county under county jurisdiction, I'm going to turn him over to county deputies. So I tell him to stay in the car, and of course I've turned off the car and taken the keys. And I've also got his ID in my hand, which is his driver's license, okay? And I go up to the little red box, and I explain, look, I have someone currently in my protective custody who explains to me or claims to me to be a federal agent I need at least a pair of deputies sent to escort him into a safe position for safekeeping overnight. And they said, well, are you asking us to detain him in the jail? And I said, well, that's up to you, you know. I'm just asking you to provide a safe haven for him so that in turn, you know, whoever it is that was after him that had chased us halfway into town, which, no, I left them behind in the mountains, okay? They didn't follow. They were not capable of following us because naturally I've been trained very highly in how to lose tails and everything else of that nature, okay? So they didn't make it to town like we did. They were back there in the mountains somewhere. Who knows? They may even run into the mountain for all I know. But anyway, so about 20 minutes later, 2 deputies arrive, and of course I take the patrol car number down, I'm taking their names down, I'm getting their IDs, and I'm checking them out to make certain they are in fact who they appear to be, and that is county sheriff's deputies, okay? So once I've verified for myself that these are in fact deputies of the law, I go ahead and release him into their custody, and they immediately put him in the back of their car. No, they do not handcuff him or anything of that nature, and they take him away, okay? The following morning, I call the sheriff's department, and I'm asking them to track down an incident that occurred at about 3:30, 3:45 in the morning the day before, or the morning, you know, earlier in the morning of that day. And they're saying, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Knight, but we don't have any record of that. And I'm saying, what? And they're saying, no, we don't have any record of that. And I said, well, let me talk to your supervisor. And the supervisor comes away with the same story. And I say to the supervisor, well, let me talk to your assistant sheriff. And the assistant sheriff says the same thing. And finally, I say, okay, now look, I'm going to talk to your sheriff, and if your sheriff is not honest with me, there will be repercussions from this. And he says, what do you mean repercussions? And I said, well, I'll just use other resources to gain the information that I need to know, okay? And I hung up the phone. Well, the sheriff gave me the same kiss line and said, no, I don't have anything on record of a couple of deputies being dispatched at such hour to such location, da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm saying, okay, this is making me very suspicious, okay? So I'll go ahead and I call a friend of mine who's with the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. And he, in turn, puts my other friend, the district attorney themselves, on the line. And I explained what had happened. And he says, you know, well, let me call John, who is the first name of the sheriff, okay, in that particular county location. And he gets on the line with John, and he gets a scoop from John, and then he calls me back approximately 45 minutes later, and he says, well, you know, because what you would call the action that you took was basically for real, and the agent that you saved the life from was actually only held at the jail facility for about 3 hours until other agents could come and take him into their custody, and they all went off together. And that's probably why there was no record made, or it was recommended by the supervisor that the event never happened. So yes, the sheriff has in fact verified that they did receive the man into their custody, and that the man in turn was picked up by federal agents and taken away. So about 3 days later, and this is the time I decide that it's time for me to move from Northern California to Southern California, the residence that I had been sharing with my first love, I had been bunking there occasionally off and on to save in hotel expense and so on and so forth. And I come out the next morning, all right, and there's a death threat stabbed with a knife into the wood of the door. Okay? And so basically I made a couple of phone calls and said, well, you know, I need to look into this very thoroughly, and I need to set up a closed-door meeting with the State Attorney General's office. And they said, not a problem, because they recognized who I was, because I've had other dealings with them previously, and I won't go into all the other dealings because that could bring up all kinds of nastiness in all kinds of sorts of different ways, all right? So anyway, we'll just say that particular project, per se, resulted in the arrest of a great many law enforcement officers and supervisors and so forth who were all sent to the federal pen for record hearing. And we'll just leave it at that, okay? So that everybody's not scratching their head and saying, well, gee, he just gave me a cliffhanger, and now he's going to tease me and not give me any details. How rude. So there's your details, all right, without going into the expletives of the details of themselves, all right? So anyway, the State Attorney General had was very open door with me simply because I had assisted him in a 6-month investigation, and that investigation, the results thereof, ended conclusively in the results that I just explained or shared with you. Okay? So anyway, I get State of California Highway Patrol licensure to drive as fast as possible between San Jose and San Francisco, which is approximately 55 miles or about an hour away. And again, I'm back in my GTO, and I'm flooring the sucker, and I'm going 105 miles an hour, okay? And a Mustang comes up alongside of me, and the driver of the Mustang is motioning me to pull over at 105 miles an hour. And I say, this boy's got to be flippantly crazy. Well, it just so happens I have a .357 Magnum, fully loaded and fully cocked, laying on the front passenger side seat, okay? And so I just nicely pick up my .357 and I wave it in the air like he's waving his arms at me, and all of a sudden you see the Mustang slowly slow down and just kind of disappear in the crowd. So anyway, I made it in San Francisco in probably about 20 to 25 minutes, okay, or less.
Yes.
And I get into town, all right, and I'm driving around, and lo and behold, of all the things that you could possibly not want to happen, a blowout of the driver's side front tire occurs. So this, in turn, puts me in a position, and I have to pull over, and I have to change the tire, and all of this kind of good thing. And I'm saying, well, I wonder why this is happening. And I didn't really understand then, and I still don't understand now, other than, of course, I thank the good Lord that, thank God, this didn't happen at 105 miles an hour, because if so, there would certainly be no way in heck that we would be having this conversation. They would have had to scrape me off the pavement of the freeway. So anyway, I go into main downtown San Francisco. Now, in downtown San Francisco, at least at that time, I can't swear to it anymore because I ain't been there in quite a while, but there are two identical federal buildings that are right across the street, on the same street, and right across the same street from each other, all right? Now, you have to understand again that this is back in, let's see.
What year are we at?
That's what I'm deducing in my brain here. Let's see.
Okay.
About 74, okay? 1974.
1974. Okay.
Now back at that time, everything federal building and federal property wise is on heightened awareness, because there's been all kinds of rumors of attacks been about to fall apart or fall into play and all this other kind of stuff. So everything is in heightened awareness. Now imagine me, okay? I am wearing a sports coat, blue jeans, a polo shirt, and I have a .38 caliber handgun strapped to me waist, all right, in plain sight, all right? And just like James Bond, I've got a briefcase handcuffed to me left wrist, all right? And so I deliberately go out of my way, and I find the security officer inside the building, and I ask him directly for directions to the State Attorney General's office. And he says, oh, no problem, just go up to the 5th floor. So he never questioned who I was. He never asked me for credentials. He just made the presumption that since I appeared to be who I was, and since I was acting with competence and authority, that obviously I had to be some kind of federal agent. He never questioned me whatsoever. Instead, he gave me directions to the elevator and told me to go up to the 5th floor. Well, I go up to the 5th floor, and it's the FBI, okay? So I go inside the lobby, and I go up to the desk, the reception area, and so forth, and I ask him, do you share an office with the Attorney General's office, and you hold meetings here or something? And she's looking at me like I'm crazy. And then she says, well, sir, on occasion we do share office space and have meetings with the State Attorney General's office, but this is not the State Attorney General's office proper. And I said, oh, well, then maybe I'm in the wrong place. And she said, oh, not necessarily so. What kind of a meeting were you having? And I said, well, it was a closed-door meeting that had been arranged strictly behind doors between myself and the State Attorney General's office. And I noticed that as she's having this conversation with me, she's pushing a button under the counter, okay? Now, you have to understand that this is about 6 o'clock or later in the evening, so all of these FBI agents are falling out of the other side of the office and going to the elevator to go home, okay? And this continues, and I'm just standing around pacing back and forth, looking very anxious, and yet I have this briefcase and a .38 caliber obviously displayed on my hip, okay? Well, about 10, 15 minutes go by, and a half a dozen agents come busting out the door with guns drawn and tell me to drop to the floor and put my hands over my head. Okay? And they then, in turn, of course, basically take me into their custody and take me into basically an interrogation room, all right? And so I'm sitting there, and, of course, my .38 is now on the counter, and that having been removed, you know. And, of course, my briefcase is still remaining handcuffed to my wrist. And then I finally, at one point, I said, okay, well, I'll just take the handcuff off because this is getting a little bit annoying. So my handcuffs are handcuffed within the latch to the briefcase, okay, together or whatever. And they start to interrogate me, and they start to ask me all kinds of questions. And I identified myself, and I told them why the purpose I had come to San Francisco, and that it could be verified if they would be so kind as to call the number with the State Attorney General's office, who would there in turn further explain that, yes, he was there for a closed-door meeting. Well, they didn't believe anything that I was telling them. They thought I was just full of jazz, and that, you know, I was just being pernicious and all this other kind of crap. So about a half an hour lapses, and they attempt to gain entry to my briefcase, and I tell them, unless you have a search warrant signed by a competent judge of jurisdiction, you're not getting in my briefcase because that's personal property. And then they say, well, gee, what other personal property do you have on you? So I proceed to pull out a .357 Magnum from underneath my left shoulder, all right? I pull out a loaded .45 from the middle of my back waistband. I pull out a .32 caliber out of my out of a sling that is on my right leg around the ankle area, and I pull out a .25 caliber that's also on another sling around the ankle of my left leg. Okay, and I put all these up on the table, and they said, "My God, why didn't you disclose to us you had all this in the first place?" And I said, "Well, I didn't see you as a threat, so why should I be worried about it?" And they looked at me and said, "Well, we had guns drawn pointed at your head. We could have blown you away." And I said, "Yeah, you could have, but you didn't, did you? Your curiosity got the better of you because you wondered why the hell this man who is standing and walking around anxiously back and forth, for all you know, I could have had a time bomb in my damn briefcase set to go off at a specific time, and I could have blown all the hell of you to back and, you know, to hell and back." And they said, "Well, that's a very valid point." And I said, "Well, you know, fortunately for you, I'm not a terrorist. I don't have any wishes whatsoever to overthrow the government in any way, shape, or form. Nor have I ever been any on the blacklist, suspect list of any particular federal agency. If anything, I am on the A list, and I have clearances well above yours." And they're saying, "Oh shit, look what we've done stepped into." So they allow me to go ahead and put back my .32, my .25, my .45, my .357, but they retain my .38. And they said, "Well, in order for us to look good, we have to at least retain the arm that was obviously that you entered the building with." And I said, "Okay, go ahead. Knock yourself out." So they said, "Well, you know, we're not really getting anywhere." And I said, "Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I know the law just as well as you do, and I know exactly what gives you the authority to do what you do, and I have authority to do what I do. So basically, we're at an impasse, okay? Or as in a chess play, they would say that, you know, there is no move that can be made by either side without the other side immediately calling checkmate. So I would like to borrow your phone, and I'm going to call a friend of mine, evidently who is obviously either somewhere else in this building or even possibly in the building across the way." And they said, "Oh, and who would this friend be?" And, of course, I named him, and he was the State Attorney General. And the State Attorney General answers the phone, and he says, "Where the hell are you? We've been waiting 25 minutes, and you ain't showed up yet, and we've had no contact from you, and we've become rather concerned because we've all of a sudden been hearing rumors that you cross certain lines, and these lines are not ones that you are allowed to cross." And I said, "Well, believe it or not, I'm over here in protective custody of the FBI." And he said, "You're what?" And I said, "Yeah, that's where I happen to be." And he says, "No problem. I'm going to send over 2 of my special agents, and they're going to take you into protective custody away from the custody of the FBI, and I don't give a shit if what hissy fit they throw or don't throw." And so that's exactly what happened. Now, when the investigation was completed, of course, it did in turn find out that there was a contract, okay? And I won't go into details there, other than to say that there were a couple gentlemen who were sent south to basically take care of me, okay, which fortunately for me, with my abilities, I was able to curtail them and send them both to the hospital for a number of months, thereby retiring them from their positions. So at this point in time, Uncle Sam comes forward and he says, well, you know, we can't guarantee your safety anymore because you've raised so many enemies, we can't even count them all. And I said, well, I'm glad, you know, that you're aware of this. It's really no problem or threat to me, but I'm ever so glad that you're competently aware of this. And they gave me a government check and told me to leave the state. So that, in turn, put me on the trail to New Orleans. All right? Now, again, there are lots of investigations that I basically went all over the country and basically took young children and older children and teens and young adults into my custody and returned them to the custody of some very well-known celebrities residing around Hollywood in that area of California. And again, because they are former clients, I cannot reveal that confidentiality. So anyway, that was how I made an awful lot of money in a very short period of time. So when I landed in New Orleans, I was virtually rich. So anyways.
Wow.
So I landed in New Orleans, okay?
And all that
and
was,
I don't,
you were just 18 years old.
Yeah. Well, like 19, another year and a half at transit. I actually left, I think I left California probably at about age 20.
Okay, so now you're living in New Orleans?
I had moved to New Orleans or landed in New Orleans. I had to make a short stop in San Antonio to drop someone else off that I was giving a ride to. And, yes, headed on to New Orleans, Sin City, the city where the city where time forgot, basically speaking. The one city, or actually the state of Louisiana, resides under French rule, okay? It is a combination of both French and English rule. And so so instead of cities or counties, you have parishes, okay? You have cities and parishes. So instead of counties, it's parishes. And, of course, the courts, the adjudication system is based on French law more so than it is on English law. And, of course, you know, we gained the state of Louisiana and the Louisiana Purchase back in the 1800s, early on anyway. So I come into the city, and I'm just saying, well, okay, I need to dish myself from the past, so I will get me a common everyday job, and I won't, you know, poke my head up in the pond and turn up on anybody's radar in regards to legal matters or anything of that nature, so I'll just lay low. So I went to work for a sales clerk and also a shipping clerk for that particular organization.
You can't go from being James Bond to a sales clerk. Come on.
I'm serious now. I'm serious now. Hang on now. I laid low. Okay. Sometimes in life you got to lay low. All right. Because sometimes you can attract the wrong kind of attention, and the wrong kind of attention can get you killed.
I have to interject something right here, okay, before you go lay low. We're at 41 minutes, and this is wonderful. Your stories are great, and I'm really enjoying them. I'm sure our listeners are. But go back. You went to New Orleans, but you were in California when you chased Anton Vander.
Now, see, you're backing up because that happened when I was only 17. That's why I told you.
Let's go back to that because we've got you in the wrong part of the world. So you know, that's okay. We don't have to be completely linear, but we need to cover these.
Okay.
Incidents.
Well, at 17 years old,
yeah.
At 17 years old, okay, I was very, very magically inclined. I had been well versed in the occult. I had a bunch of spiritual gifts. I had a bunch of magical traditions that I'd been initiated in. The lodges and so forth that I belonged to, I will no longer disclose, simply for my own sanity, because I had to be crazy back then, obviously. So anyway, I got into a situation where a couple of witches had basically raised an entity. I'll put it that way. All right. I won't say they were good. I won't say they were bad. However, they were of the domineering kind. All right. And having raised this entity under a specific ritual classification, they didn't know what the hell to do. And I said, well, you mean to tell me that you walked yourself through the front phase of things and you never even considered what the back end of things would be? Oh, no, we just thought it would be very interesting. And I said, dabblers. I come across you kind of people all the time. You go to the metaphysical bookstores or the occult bookstores and you buy a book on magic and you open the book on magic and you sit there and you start doing these rites and rituals and so forth. And granted, 99% of the time, the rites and rituals described in the books are only a third accurate. But if by chance you happen to have some inner intuition or some inner knowledge, and you go ahead and you rattle off these rites and rituals and do all these invocations and supplications and all this kind of stuff, and you raise something actual that comes into your reality, you should also be advised beforehand how the hell you get rid of it. Because if you can't, then you're stuck. And so this is where they had called me for help. All right? So basically I went in and I banished this entity, and we became good friends in a very short period of time because they looked upon it as I just saved their lives. And I said, well, you know, you can do me a favor. And I said, oh, what's that? And they says, well, we would like to get rid of a specific person running a specific church in San Francisco because his negative presence and his negative energy is draining our sister covens from attempting to be positive. And I said, are you sure? And they said, oh, yeah. And so I said, well, who is it that you're referring to? And they said, Anton Zander LaVey, the First Church of Satan. He is the founder of the First Church of Satan. And the First Church of Satan has been in existence now for, God only knows, probably 60, 70 years, I'm sure, if not longer. Simply because that was the first time they actually came out public with it, because they figured that, well, you know, they'd already had Aleister Crowley, the Beast, basically come out in public beforehand. So they said, well, if one person can do that, why not a church? So anyway, they established their church and everything else. So me and the two witches got together and used the power of three basically to dismantle his place of residence. And we said, now, you have no choice, but you must pack up your stuff and you must be gone in 72 hours. If you're not gone in 72 hours, then in turn there will be lively consequences. And they're saying, well, who the hell?
Were you having a conversation with him, or was this just all ritual?
Yes, I was having a conversation with the man after I had done a number of rites, which I will not go into detail about, okay? So basically you could say that I was making hypnotic suggestion to him over the phone saying, look, I know who you are, I know where you came from, I've seen what you do, and we as a community do not want you here. And he's saying, well, who the hell are you? And I said, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters most is what I can do. And at that point in time, basically, the desk he was sitting at folded in half. And
the desk he was sitting at folded in half, and what happened?
In other words, it was though as someone had taken a saw across the desk and sawed the desk in half. Okay?
Oh, wow.
So the only thing he was left holding was his phone in his hand. And I did this so to get the point across. Now remember, I am not one that is publicly demonstrative, nor can I be challenged, nor can I be taunted in any way to say, prove this or prove that or whatever. Okay? I'm just not that kind of person or that kind of being. All right? So anyway, that got the point across, and needless to say, he and his whimsical children, or whoever the hell they were, packed their stuff and left San Francisco.
Wow. So the next thing, are you finished with that episode? Anything else happened?
Yeah.
Who left and what else happened? That
story's short and sweet and to the point.
Okay. So what's this dark entity that wants to tell
you see, here you go.
Which, I'm going down your list you gave me. She was found dead.
Yeah, I know, but that occurred between ages 15 and 18. And you took me all the way to New Orleans, where I'm about to turn 21 in New Orleans. And that's why I said that I wanted to give you the streamline. Okay, well, that's fine. We can side real reality, because reality and time are nothing but a figment of our imagination anyway.
Right.
So anyway, getting back to the point. All right. This was the most drastic, confrontation, battle, whatever you want to put it phrase-wise, all right? I had been invited to dinner with a male best friend and his lady friend, all right, at her apartment, all right? Now, of course, it had come into my knowledge that basically this was a relationship that her mother did not want to transpire. And her mother, according to rumor, what have you, was supposedly or allegedly one of the most powerful dark witches in the area, okay? So, as the night transpired, we had a bit of wine, we had a bit of food, we had a bit of jovial conversation and all this kind of good stuff. And I basically stretched out on a very wonderfully padded leather couch in the living room. Okay, now when you come into this environment, you come in through the front door, and immediately to your left is like a little sitting dining area, and right beyond that is a kitchen. Okay, off to the right is a fairly large living room that has a television and a fireplace and all this kind of good stuff. It's carpeted and all that kind of good stuff, and it has a couple of recliners and a couch to give you an idea of how big a space we're talking. All right, you go down the hallway, all right, and the hallway consists of 2 additional bedrooms and another. Actually, there are 2 bathrooms. There's a bathroom directly at the end of the hall, and then there's also a bathroom in the middle of the hall. So it was a fairly good-sized apartment, all right? So anyway, as a retaliation, since the daughter would not listen to the mother, who supposedly possessed all the future knowledge of what she should do or not do, right? She tells her daughter, well, you need to break off. If you don't break off with this boy, I'm going to make you wish the hell you had. And she took this as a threat, but at the same time, she didn't know what the hell to do or who to turn to or whatever. And, of course, this was all going on without any knowledge of mine whatsoever, because I didn't learn all the details till after everything had already been said and done. Okay? So I'm just jovially stretching out on the couch, and the 2 of the lovebirds have gone on down the hallway to the farthest bedroom and closed the door and did whatever they wanted to do. Okay? And I'm laying here on this couch, and it gets to be about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, I smell a stench in the room that hadn't been there before. And I'm kind of groggily coming half awake, all right, because my senses are telling me something's not right. And the next thing I know, I feel like a 500-pound weight sitting on my chest. And my eyes come completely open, and I am seeing this dark entity. Because, yes, there was an energetic figure sitting on my chest, and it had an outline of nothing but darkness, blackness, okay? And it basically is now not only sitting on my chest, it decides it wants to choke me to death. So, of course, being who I am, I went to Source, and I said, okay, I need a little bit of help here. And so, basically, within a matter of a few seconds, the hands were repelled from my neck, and the poor thing was bundled up like in a suitcase and banged off a couple walls and slam dunked into the fireplace a couple times and sent packing to back where it had come from. All right? Now, the following morning, the girlfriend and the daughter get an official phone call from the police department, and, of course, they verify that she is who she is and that she's connected. And then all of a sudden they give her the bad news. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but your mother was found this morning in front of what appears to be some kind of makeshift altar that had all kinds of black candles burning. And she's got all kinds of swords and daggers and all this other kind of thing. And the weird thing is the poor woman looks like she's got marks around her neck as though something had picked her up physically and was holding her midair by her neck. And then as it released her, whoever it was, had basically created within her such a massive heart attack she instantaneously died.
Wow.
Okay, here's the inside scoop, all right? This woman, this dark witch, had raised or summoned an entity of pure violence. All right? Now, when you raise entities of this nature, they expect to be compensated. The manner in which such entities normally get compensated is basically to eat the spirit, or, as in the transitory term, to eat the soul of the given individual that they are sent after to devour. All right? Now, in this particular instance, she did not have any way of knowing that I was in the apartment with her daughter and her boyfriend. She was of the impression that there was only one male in the premises. So therefore, no problem. This thing can come over and take whoever the hell it is and come back and go on its way. No problem. No big deal. She didn't recognize that I was there, and of course, so when it entered the premises, I was the first male it fell upon, and it was not discriminating as to what male it took, so naturally I was the most available, and so that's why it attacked me. All right? So when this thing was repelled back, it was most angry and most disturbed, and it took her life because she had summoned it and had not repaid it with a life in kind.
Wow.
And that's why she was found dead the following morning. So there.
So that's that episode. So you went into the forest of the Nicene marks, and trees came to life and spoke to you.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. Of course, now I don't know how much I was helped by psilocybin or not. Other than my friends became quite annoyed with me because I had taken magic mushrooms along with themselves early in the morning, and we set out to progress down a very windy and somewhat hidden road close to the middle of the state of California. And it's hidden very intrinsically. In other words, you have to shift and change 4 or 5 different highways, and you have to take some old country bumpkin roads and all this kind of noise. And of course, unfortunately, due to the influence of what we had taken, I was asking them to stop about every 30 minutes, and I would get out and walk around the car and say, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And then I would redeposit myself inside the car, and they would in turn go on. And after the second time that this happened, basically my friends had put me in the back of the car with a friend on each side of me, and they were basically determined they were going to shut me up and keep me in place until we got to our destination. Now, it's called the Forest of the Nicene Marks. It's from the Nicene period of history. During the Nicene period of history, in our great, wonderful earth that we reside upon, a great many glaciers went through a great many valleys, moved mountains apart, and went across forests and all this kind of thing. And as they transited through these forests, the wood of these trees became instantaneously frozen, okay? And as a result, because of the way in which the ice often transited through, or because of the way in which branches were pulled down at weird angles and everything, when you look at these trees, it looks like you're looking at a bunch of weird old men that have very distorted faces, and their arms and their legs are all at weird angles, okay? So in other words, these trees actually have a sort of human facade to them in regards to being that they're very distorted in appearance, all right? So naturally, I get out the car, okay, and my friends are getting out in the car, and of course we all smoke, so we're having a cigarette since we had agreed not to smoke in the car, and it had already been an hour and a half ride, and all this kind of good stuff, regardless of my interims telling them to stop so that, you know, in turn we could find out where we were and whether we were there yet or not. So anyway, we arrive at the forest, and we all get out the car, and they're all stomping around, and I'm stomping around, and all of a sudden I'm looking at these trees, and these trees are reaching out to me mentally, and they're saying, "We know who you are." And I'm saying, "You do?" And they're saying, "Oh, yes, we've been expecting you." And I'm saying, "Oh, wait a minute now. You've been expecting me?" And they said, "Well, yeah, not in a malevolent way, mind you, but we just figured that you were a person that were aware enough that we could have a conversation." And I'm going, oh,
Wow.
okay, this must really look bizarre to my friends, because my friends are sitting here behind me at angles to me, watching my hands fly up in the air and make all kinds of weird gestures, and my body language is saying as though I am holding a conversation with what obviously has to be a dead tree. So how the hell is this happening, or why the hell is this happening? And, of course, they just pass it off and say, oh, it must be the drugs, no problem. So I sat there and conversed with 2 or 3 trees, all right, and that is my memory of the forest of the Nicene Marks. And it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful forest if you like kind of wackadoo and weird, out-of-place strangeness. Now, if you don't care for weird, out-of-place kind of wackadoo strangeness, then you would probably find it very frightening or even almost terroristic to it. Because, yes, some of the trees in combination look like they're actually moving. Okay? They are not, because it's an optical illusion, because they're frozen in place, and they're so darn old and ancient that they're frozen. You see, you have to understand, they are not alive. But there are some of them that would give you the impression like they're about to reach out and grab you.
Right.
So, as you might imagine, this was quite an animated conversation, and of course this went on for an hour or two, and then my friends got bored, and I got bored, and we all hustled back into the car and went back on our merry way.
Well, I've always had an affinity with trees, and I've been known to go over and hug giant trees, and it seems like they have their conscience.
Definitely. Oh, God, you have not been amongst trees until you've walked amongst the redwoods. The redwoods are so spectacular
I have
and
walked
so
amongst
ancient.
the redwoods, and they're amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Oh, they are. The energy there and everything else. And actually, on a very, very slim side trail, I was hiking one afternoon amongst the redwoods, okay, and I was communing with the trees, and actually I sat upon a tree that had been completely cut down, and the only thing left of it was the stump of the roots, okay? And, I mean, this thing, according to the circles, which is the way you count age on trees, all right, must have been at least 2,000 or 3,000 years old, all right? And I decided, well, this is a nice sunny day, and I had me something to drink, and I had me, I was just whisking around in the forest and had come upon it through a hiking trail and all this kind of thing. So my car was probably about an hour away or so, and I was perfectly by myself, okay? I was on an expedition to just clear my mind, clear my thoughts, get in contact with Earth and get in contact with the trees and all this good kind of stuff. And so I decided that I would sit in the midst of this humongous stump that was, I don't know, maybe 8-10 feet in diameter. Okay? So I climbed up on the stump that was maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and I sat in the middle. And, of course, back in those days, I could assume a lotus position, which I wouldn't even attempt anymore, because my poor legs just say, no, we're not playing this, okay? The knees and the hips, no, we don't do that anymore, okay? Well, you might have done that back in the day, but you're not doing that nowadays, okay? If you want to meditate, you find you a nice comfy lounger, or you lay down on your bed, or you do something other, but no, we are not doing this lotus position, okay? That's fine for swamis and all these other people that, get into all this tantric strangeness as far as being able to move their body limbs in all kinds of contorted forms and so forth, which that's great. Hey, I'm more power to them, blessings upon them, and all that kind of good stuff to have that kind of equilibrium and that kind of muscle resistance and flexibility. So anyway, I'm sitting here and I'm meditating, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm drawn to the core of the earth. Okay, I'm no longer in the forest now. I'm being drawn by a shaft of green light down to the vibrant core of the earth. And I go down, down, down through all the root systems, through all the rock formations and everything else. And I come upon this like lavic, I don't know what you describe, a layer, I guess would be the best word. And all of a sudden I transit through that, and I come into like this hidden chamber, this humongously hidden chamber. And there was a diamond, a multifaceted diamond. There actually, you could say maybe 10 diamonds, all merged together and interlaced together as though they were one stone or one jewel or one essence, And it's continually spinning on its own axis. as though it were suspended in air by some kind of energy that you couldn't perceive, or the energy you could only feel rather than actually sense in any other way. And all of a sudden, this booming feminine voice comes out of nowhere, and she says, "Ah, Richard, 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 ever so glad to see you again. We're glad that you have returned to visit us." And I'm saying, "Okay." And she says, I am Gaia, the goddess of the earth, and I am glad and I warmly receive you, for I have felt you many times as you have passed earnest, heartfelt feelings unto me, or banished away darkness, or banished away worry and care and concern into my topsoil, so that in turn it would not affect you negatively, nor affect anyone else negatively. And she says, and I am very receptive, and I have felt the love that you have sent to me thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And I said, okay. So now I'm very warm, and I'm feeling very blissful, and I'm feeling very content, because now I'm no longer concerned about this voice that is booming overhead and coming out of the walls that I couldn't relate to a few minutes ago, you know? Mm-hmm. And she says, well, you know, I'm glad to see you. I'm very glad to see you. And she says, you know, I have a plight. And I said, oh, what could that possibly be? I mean, after all, you're a goddess, and I'm merely a mortal, you know. And she says, oh, no, you can't fool me that way. And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, I see through you, and I see the spirit that you are, and not this dummy of a puppet that you have in front of me. And I said, oh, well, that's nice. And so we communed, and I just felt ever so joyful and just bliss-filled and all this kind of stuff. And so she says, well, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and help you to ascend back to where you were, however long ago it was. And when you get there, I want you to take a path that you'll find immediately to your right, and then you can zigzag a little bit to the left, and then you'll find something special. And I'm saying, oh, okay, this is really strange. But I took her at her word, you know, so up through the layers of the earth I went and back into my body. And of course, you know, I'm in this lotus position, and of course about now my body's starting to feel fatigued and a bit tired, so I stretch out my legs and shake them around and walk around a bit. And then of course it comes to me as a reminder that, hello, you're supposed to go off on this little path to the right, and then this little path over here to the left. And so I do it as intuitively I had been directed. And so I get to a clearing in the woods, all right? And there's all kinds of oaks, and there's all kinds of elms and cedars, as well as redwoods in the background, okay? Mm-hmm. And at a far away tree, there appears to be something that is hanging there that shouldn't be hanging there. And I'm saying to myself, no, I must be hallucinating. What is this? And, of course, on this particular venture, no, I was not under any kind of narcotic influence or anything else. Matter of fact, I love sweet tea, and I was drinking sweet tea at the time to keep me hydrated and so forth. So anyway, I get closer, and I'm going around to the other side of the clearing of these trees, and basically there hangs a button-up shirt hanging from the limb of a tree. And I get to studying it, and it is a wonderful color of kind of like a vermilion rouge combined. It's kind of this very, very light-colored purplish, okay? And there's all kinds of flowers, and very intricate flowers woven into this shirt. And I'm saying, well, what the devil is this? And all of a sudden, it's like the breeze comes through, and as the breeze passes my ears, it's saying, it's yours. And so I went ahead and I took this shirt, and I tried it on, and it fit me most perfectly. And I was carrying a wee bit of a knapsack at the time, so I went ahead and took off the shirt, because I was only wearing a tank top, and, you know, it was kind of a sunny day and so forth. And so I went ahead and folded the shirt up, and I put it away in my backpack, and off I went.
Wow. And what happened?
Yeah, I told you. I got back, and, you know, the rest of the story in regards to that particular shirt doesn't unfold until I'm actually back in Florence.
Let me look at the time. How much time do we have here? We have 15 minutes. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm looking at the last item before we get to age 20. You killed a man who had rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay, well,
years.
again, you see, that happened back when I was 19, before I left California.
19.
That's why I said, okay.
Yeah,
so anyway, all right. Reverting back
okay.
to my interaction with the Temple of the Stars. I am no longer a member of the National Guard because of a very negative situation that happened. I won't even get details on that, other than to say that within 6 months' time, I was honored the discharge from the service and all that kind of good stuff. And so I went on my investigations and all this kind of good stuff and was helping all kinds of people all over the county, all over the state, and all over the country to a large extent, here and there and everywhere. So anyway, at the age of 19, I was continuing to go back and forth from northern to southern California because I had relatives interspersed up and down the coast, all right? And so I would make certain that on Saturday evenings I would always be in San Jose to attend the Temple of the Stars. Well, in this particular instance, there was a man that got to looking at me, and he stared at me the whole time that we were together watching this presentation. I don't even remember what the presentation was now. But anyway, we was watching this presentation, so my eyes were mainly focused to the speaker and all that kind of good stuff. And this man, who was dressed in a three-piece suit, kept staring at me. And every time I would look towards him, he would stare directly, almost like looking through my eyes. And I'm going, what in the hell is this all about? And I had come with 3 friends, okay? So I didn't feel insecure by any means. Not only that, but by that time I had my 2nd and 3rd black belts. So I was very accomplished as a martial artist by that time. Not to mention my skills with weaponry and so on and so forth. Anyway, but it was just peculiar. First off, he didn't fit in because he's wearing this very tidy 3-piece suit, okay? And we're a very casual group. Very seldom does anyone even so much as wear a tie. And here this man is in a very tidy 3-piece suit, tie and all. And yet he's staring at me and keeps staring at me and keeps staring at me. So I said, well, finally my curiosity got the better of me. And so I turned to my friends who were sitting right next to me, both sides of me. And I said, look, I don't know what's going on, but I've got to check this guy out because he's been staring at me all night long. And they said, what guy? And I said, well, you can't miss him. He doesn't even fit in the group. That man over there that's in the dark blue 3-piece suit. And they said, oh, we hadn't even noticed him. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't notice him. The guy's been staring holes through my head the whole evening. So anyway, I get with him and he motions and says, we need to leave the room because I have to discuss something with you. And I said, well, who are you and why are you here and why have you picked me out of a crowd of 30 to 50 people and only me, and your interest has been devoted totally to me the whole night long? And he says, well, I want you to come with me because I believe there's a friend of mine that you can help most drastically. And I said, really? And he says, yeah, you're aware of intuition, right? I said, yeah, slightly. And he says, well, you know that when you're put on a mission by Spirit, that you're sent on a mission to go find a specific person and return with that specific person from whence you came. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyway, I left my car there. I gave my car keys to my trusted friend so that in turn, if I called him, he could come and pick me up if necessary from wherever I happen to be, because this man walks me out and there's a limo sitting there, okay? And so we get in the back of the limo and we drive for about 45, 50 minutes through all kinds of twists and turns. And we come up to a very nice ranch-looking house, and it's very ornate, and it's behind the arched gateway and all this kind of noise. And there's Rolls Royces in the driveway and all this kind of noise, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, this attests to why the man's attired the way he is, at least. So anyway, we get out the car and everything, and I'm led inside, and I meet a man, and this poor man is laying up in a bed, and his hands and his feet are totally, completely crippled, okay? And his head is sort of disjointed off to one side even, as though all the muscles or tendons in his hands and feet had contracted due to rheumatoid arthritis or some such malignancy. And they said, well, unfortunately, he's been this way for the last 35 years, and Spirit has told me that you've been led here to heal the man. And I'm saying, oh, I am? And he says, yeah. So I immediately sit down in a chair and I go into meditation and I basically commune with Source. And I am told by my archangel friends and others that, yes, you are here and you will perform a rite known in Christianity as the laying on of hands. And so basically I did this, and basically I was covering my hands, who had become completely hot with energy, passing between streams between my hands and into this person's body from head to toe. And I did about 3 passages, and I basically said, how are you feeling now? And he says, I'm feeling a bit better. I thank you. And I said, okay, no problem. And so basically I rode the limo back to where my car was at, and I went and got my keys from my friend and, of course, drove myself home. And I said, well, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this happened for 2 more times, okay? On the second time, the man's feet basically were beginning to uncurl, and his hands were beginning to have less tension in them. And he says, I don't know who you are or what you're doing, but I'm awful glad that you're here, and I'm awful glad that you're doing it. And I said, well, you have to understand, you see, I do nothing. I am only the vessel that through which the movement and the energy or the love of God is moving through me in order to reach unto you to create the changes in you that you feel transpiring. And he says, okay. And so I left, and I come back a couple weeks later and basically did the same routine. And at this time, the man completely transformed. His hands and his feet completely unraveled. He had full movement. All the tendons, muscles, sinews in his body were completely returned to normal, and he was able to get out of bed and hug me.
Oh.
And he said, I don't know who you are or how you did this, but I am ever so grateful. And I said, well, in order to show your gratitude, don't express it toward me. Express it towards God, because it is God that has moved through me to reach out to you to cure you from whatever it was that was ailing you. And he said, well, surely I can reward you in some way. And I said, no, I don't want any reward. Well, surely you will take money. No, I don't want your money. Well, surely there's something I can do to benefit you. Sir, you have benefited me by receiving from me the love that God expressed towards you, and that was all that was required of me, and that is all that is required of you. And at that point in time, I went outside, got in my car, and disappeared.
Wow. Did you ever see him after that?
Do what now?
Did a follow-up? Did you ever?
No. I've never ever attempted to. Nope, I've never ever attempted to make any further contact with him. I did receive a few postcards that were sent to a P.O. box, and he said, I can't believe it's been a whole 3 years, and I remain completely cured the way you left me.
Wow.
And that was the closure to the whole situation.
What a wonderful story. Wow.
But again,
So
you see, I have to tell you that everyone is capable of doing this. All you have to do is be receptive to the love of God, and the love of God will move through you in all instances. And your life will be dramatically changed because you're no longer struggling as a human being. You're now in total receptivity to the will and the generosity of God, which was the divine intention when you came here in the first place.
And that's basically what Jesus taught. As I do, so can you. That type of thing. So we all have these abilities, and yet we're so deeply ingrained in this paradigm, in this matrix that our beliefs are keeping us,
Yes,
in this,
it's like the more I have noticed and observed all life long, which has been over 60 years now. Okay, that as you transit through life, there are millions of distractions, whether it be people, circumstances, situations, and so on and so forth, that occur around you and even involve you and so forth. And it seems like the more attention you spend in quietude and stillness, tending to your innermost self and recognizing your own inner truth, and your own inner truth being that you are divine, okay, the more readily the what would you call them, distractions and so forth, obstacles and all the rest of it, all come forward as though to attack you, to say to you, well, no, you can't do that. You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to have these abilities. You don't belong here. You must be from somewhere else because you don't belong here. We can't control you. And, of course, my retort is, well, I'm sorry, but when I was created, I was not created to be controlled by anyone, anything, or anywhere in any plane of existence or throughout the entirety of creation. So if you depend upon your own resources to attempt in some way to control me, you will utterly fail. Because, you see, there's one thing that is universal as far as a law and as far as the truth is. And that is, you cannot rebel or oppose that which has created you, because to do so is totally futile. Rather, the key is to live in harmony with they that have created you, and then in turn, as long as you are humble and filled with gratitude and love, then in turn you will find the embrace of that love becoming more and more prominent and more eminent in your own personal life.
So just to get us on track here, we just have 5 minutes left. So we're going to end the show here. The next note I have is age 20. Do you have anything that you want to, like a quick wrap-up of your life?
I will give you this.
20?
I will give you this one story, which is a perfect summation on the thought line that we were just having. All right? I met a lady in New Orleans, and basically I was going to write a book with her, all about the Men in Black and how the Men in Black had miraculously cured her son, who had dove headfirst into an empty swimming pool and broke his neck in 3 places. And they came and they visited him, and they basically healed him over time. Now, that's the beginning of that story, and I will finish that story the next time around. That way it finds points where we need to pick up at, okay? Well, in the interim...
so make a note of that.
Oh, yes, I will. On one bright and sunny, it's notated in my myriad brain, whatever.
Excellent.
and so anyway... because, I mean, this is easy for me to tell because naturally I'm relating my own experiences, you know? And that's the easiest thing you can ever tell. So anyway, one sunny afternoon, me and this lady, who we shall call Muriel, without going into any further details, which is also an angelic name, just so all of you listening realize that. Any name that ends with EL is an angelic name, because L is actually a name of God, or it resides and becomes frequency-wise with the sons and daughters of God, okay? That's what L means in both Hebrew and a number of other languages. So anyway, Muriel and I go walking to St. Louis Cathedral, which is in Jackson Square, which is right across from the river in downtown New Orleans, which is right on the outskirts of the French Quarter, just to give you some hindsight as to where exactly we're traveling to now. And Jackson Square has this most wonderful St. Louis Cathedral. It has 2 twin spires, and it is a massive cathedral that could probably hold, maybe a couple thousand people when fully packed. Well, anyway, we're not so interested in going into the church, rather we're being pulled sort of to a back courtyard wherein you go through an iron gate, and in the middle of the courtyard, there's like a couple of cement benches, and there stands maybe 10 feet away from the benches the statue of the Sacred Heart of Christ, okay, with his hands out held and all this kind of thing. And, of course, Muriel and I are having some very quiet conversation, and all of a sudden I happen to look up, and it's as though the head of the statue has decisively moved an inch or two, as though the statue itself is staring at me. So I'm going, okay, am I seeing things, or what is going on here? And all of a sudden the hands start moving, and the hands start making gestures and everything else, and I get this booming voice across to me in a very low, sonorous tone, and he says, I am not one that normally gets angry, but in this instance I am very angry. And I said, whatever, Lord, would it be that you could basically make you angry? And he says, well, I am most angered because they have taken Mary away and not replaced her. And I'm saying, oh, okay. And I'm turning to my friend Muriel, and I'm looking at Muriel most questioningly. And, of course, I turn to her and I say, well, are you seeing this? Are you perceiving what I'm perceiving? And she says, well, whatever do you mean? And I said, well, there's something very unusual going on here. Oh, and she turns back to me and says, oh, if you're talking about the moving statue, yeah, that is a kind of berserk, kind of bizarre, I've never seen statues do that before. But, yes, I'm seeing it too. So I said, okay, that's all the validation that I needed. Thank you. And I immediately got up off a bench, and I went and proceeded immediately into the church, which the cathedral I had visited numerous times throughout the 10 years that I lived in New Orleans, okay? And I went and I found a nun, okay, and I was greeted by the nun, and I started taking a peripheral view of what was going on, and there was indeed a statue of Mary off to the right-hand corner of the church that was absolutely gone, okay? And so I inquired of the nun, well, you know, what is going on here? Why is it this statue of Mary is missing? And she says, oh, I don't know, because I'm only visiting. I don't know. Let me get the priest for you. So she goes and she gets the priest, and the priest comes out and he says, oh, well, you know, the statue of Mary is missing because from time to time we take them down very carefully and very gently and off to another site where they are microscopically clean of all dust and any mold or any kind of mildew or anything of that nature that might be attaching itself to the statue. And after this is done, after this cleaning is done, then in turn, of course, the statue is returned to its original pedestal inside the cathedral. And I said, well, how long has she been gone? And he said, oh, about 3 weeks. And I said, well, how long does it normally take? About a week. And I said, oh, okay, everything's coming together now. So anyway, I went back, and of course, this was probably a few days later, and I went to the courtyard and to the statue of Christ by myself, and I said, well, Lord, you know, the human explanation is that Mary is missing and has been missing due to unforeseen delays. And he, of course, responded and said, get Mary back. Get Mary back. And I said, okay, so I went back into the church, and lo and behold, just as I'm entering the church from one of the other copses that are another hidden entry to the church, lo and behold, here comes the statue of Mary being held gently up by about 10 different people, and they are bringing her politely over to the pedestal and standing her up and making certain that all the candles and all the sashes and all the colors and all the flowers and all the rest of the regalia is restored to its proper place. And rather than making a notation of any kind of comment or interaction with anybody that was present, I immediately walked back outside, which, of course, this was around midday, okay, so the sun's brightly up behind me. And I go into the courtyard, and I sit on the bench, and I gaze at Christ, and Christ has a tear in one eye and the most joyous smile I've ever seen on a human face. And his arms moved together, and as his arms moved together, he gave me a blessing of the sign of the cross, and then he refrained from moving anymore.
Wow. And we're going to have to end right there because we actually are off the air, but this will be in the recording. Wow, that's an amazing story. So,
and the
is
perfect
that the end of that? Anything else?
Yep. And now all we have to do, all you have to remember is the next time we meet is remind me to tell you the story of Miriam. See how easy that is?
Okay, Miriam. I'll make a note of Miriam. So actually, the next opening I have is the the 24th. So we'll talk offline and find a good date to have you back for part 4. So
yes.
You have been listening to Aquarian Radio Network, and this is an episode of The Sacred Matrix, and I'm Janet Lessin, and this is Richard Knight, and we've been enjoying these conversations with Richard, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. So we will be back on Tuesday with Dan Cooper on Stargate to Cosmos, and the 12th is Carlo Carnavallini, and the 19th is Craig Capavasso, Part 2. You can talk about his new book. So much love and blessings and aloha, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you, Richard, once again, and you have a good evening, everybody. Much love and blessings. Aloha.
Yes. Aloha to all, and mahalo.